Hello, Brett. How are you?
Hey, pretty good. I got this in my inbox and I was like, oh, I could probably attend this one. I got another one at 11, another one at noon, and I got to get ready for the Privacy Law Scholars Conference. I'm presenting
Yeah.
someone else's paper tomorrow, I think.
Oh, is it tomorrow? Mine's Friday. Thank goodness. That's on
It's
my.
Thursday and Friday. I'm not sure. I got to look at the
Yeah.
schedule again. I'm sort of bouncing among different things. So
Yeah, I had to remind people yesterday that yes, I'm here in Bloomington, but all these conferences that I was supposed to be at are still happening. So, yeah, this week is full of stuff, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I haven't read my paper yet. I started reading others over the weekend because
the
some of
one
them,
you're presenting?
yeah, I haven't even read the one I'm presenting yet.
Oh.
So, although as of right now, I'm not till Friday, so it's my afternoon.
Yeah, I'm presenting. I got to figure out whether it's Thursday or Friday.
Yeah.
But I got to figure out how I'm going to. I mean, you only present for like 5 to 10 minutes, so you're supposed to. It's supposed to really we're just moderating. But
Yeah, that's right.
But that said, I will give the full 10 minutes probably and try to. It's a lot of constructive criticism. I got to make sure is constructive.
Yeah, I'm also sort of taking the view that some people might have wanted to read the papers, but then now that we're at home, might have not had the opportunity. So I'm going to do a summary too.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, maybe I should think more about summarizing of the paper than I had been. So
Yeah.
I've read it and took a lot of notes about it. But we'll see.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Angie.
Hello, everybody. I see a whole group of people have joined. There's just a few of us that were catching up a little bit. Oh, wow. Like suddenly there's a lot. That's amazing. So I'm not officially in charge. So we're waiting for Scott. I was just saying hi to a couple of friends who popped in. So feel free to say hi to people stuff. One of my favorite lines out of A Few Good Men is, I have absolutely no responsibility as it relates to this project. I'm like, me too. That's my move for today. Although I'm wearing my workshop shirt.
Oh, cool.
I haven't had the opportunity to brand for a while, so I can finally wear t-shirts. Who else is on? I see. Oh, wow, there's a really good mix of people here. This is interesting. Huh.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So just so everyone knows, because I don't see Scott popping in here yet, this is our usual room. So you should be able to unmute yourself. Don't feel like you have to use your camera if you don't want. But you should have control over your environment, unlike some of the other things that we do that we don't really turn you on and off. We don't let you.
There is a Scott.
Oh, there's Scott.
Good morning, guys. How are you?
Good morning. I was just telling people, feel free to, you have control over your microphones and your cameras in this setting. So feel free to do what you're happy to be doing.
Mad with power. No,
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
And then I said I have no responsibility whatsoever, and we're waiting for Scott, who does.
Oh, yeah. I'm just frolicking into flowers, so clearly no idea. It's good to see you all, though. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you. Nice to see you, Scott.
It's good to see you as well. Yes, indeed. Yes, David and Brett, Gustavo. We're getting the band back together. This is lovely. Hello, Janet and Lisa. Hello. Congratulations on your new book. That's very exciting.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such a relief to have it over.
Oh my gosh, right? Yes. No. Really looking forward to featuring that. It's going to be very exciting.
Table of contents is amazing. I ordered it this morning and cannot believe how ambitious that project was. Congratulations. I can't wait to read it.
Thank you so much. It started out as one of these, oh, we'll just go to Jazzy Bass and make this sort of practitioner guide on system design. And then we made the mistake of accepting a contract with Stanford University Press, and it completely changed what the book was, Oh, it's a scholarly reference volume. Okay, fine. But at least that it's done.
No, that's it. And that's no small thing. I hope you can actually take a well-deserved respite a little bit.
Well, I've
after
been on
that.
sabbatical, but you know, a sabbatical in the middle of COVID is not exactly.
Not quite the same feel, right? Yeah, no, exactly.
No.
You can't gallivant around the world.
Feel free to put the link to the book in the chat if you want, so people know what we're talking
Oh,
about.
that'd be great. That'd be great, Angie.
Because some of us are less attentive to those workshop pushed out emails at times, I'll be honest
Oh,
with
no,
you.
for sure. There can be quite a few of them.
Yeah. It
Thank
looks
you
like an
so
amazing
much.
book.
And speaking of the chat, I just put in our kind of tentative agenda so you guys can see roughly what we had in mind. Pretty relatively unstructured, but we thought at least it would be good to kind of hit our highlights, and we can hopefully still have plenty of time for discussion at the end. But just so that we have an idea for kind of everybody that's on the call, I'm wondering if we could start, and we don't want to take too long, but maybe just in a minute or less, if you wouldn't mind just saying, who you are, kind of a little bit about maybe your current role / institution, and most importantly, kind of why you decided to join. If you wanted to include a sentence or two about your current research related to this, that would be great. And then from there, we can move on to the specific working groups that have been set up so far, and hopefully find some synergies after that. As a heads up, Kate is going to hopefully be joining us, but she's kindly ramping up a grant application for us that's due this morning right now. So it's okay. She doesn't join. She has a very legitimate excuse, but hopefully she'll be joining toward the end to talk about some relevant opportunities that she's found out about. So with that, if that sounds okay, in no particular order, I'm just going to kind of go across the screen here, if that sounds all right, and just call on folks. But I think you guys probably all know who I am, but just in case, when I'm not hanging out in the flower bed, I'm Scott Shackelford. I'm the executive director of the Ostrom Workshop. Director of the program on cyber and internet governance. I'm the chair of the cybersecurity program at IU, and fight crime by night. That's more than enough about this. On the pandemic stuff, I've done a little bit of research on this so far, mostly in the cyber context related to herd immunity for a recent Internet of Things book that came out. So I kind of got a little bit in the public health stuff as I was researching some of that aspect, but I don't have a big background in this area. So I'm kind of here to learn and hopefully also just kind of make connections. So with that, Angie, you want to take over?
Hello, everyone. I think I'm supposed to officially say I am Batman from my favorite show in the world, but
Yes.
I am the director at the Ostrom Workshop on data management, information governance, obviously here at IU. We had been already doing health-related, social service-related service directories and connections of information in and across those environments and data trusts and things like that. And now that pilot will probably still move ahead, but there's been a massive pivot here, obviously, for almost obvious reasons. And so there's some work going on in that area right now as it relates to health-related information and how we protect your privacy, quite honestly. And then I also do tons of work, and I'm continuing to do work in the state of Indiana and the US, quite honestly, in bringing the justice environments into digital and the digital world and technology deployments, which is obviously ramped up tremendously as well. And we've launched several projects in the next couple of days related to that. And then I need to look at my board. I won't take a couple of them because I know some of my friends are on here. Oh, the other one is we're working on, which I don't know, I haven't seen Diane pop in, but we're working on workforce and the aging population and that sort of area as well. But I don't want to go into too much because some of these things I'm working on, people are on here. So I'm going to stop with that, but we're doing a bunch of stuff in this area.
No, that's great, Angie. And you'll have the chance, obviously, to kind of expand on any of that you'd like to in just a second when we get to the working group. But that's wonderful. Thank you. And just briefly, Brett, do you want to say a quick hello?
Hey, everybody. Brett Frischman. I'm on I forgot what my title, like faculty affiliate or something with the workshop. I'm at Villanova University. I do a lot of work on knowledge commons, infrastructure commons, things like that. I got a couple projects, some with people here. Yeah, and just I'm a lurking, crashing, just jumping into the Zoom call between my next Zoom call, which is at 11. So I thought
Oh,
I'd
no, that's awesome.
say hi to
We're
folks.
happy to be the sandwich Zoom call when you're not re-engineering humanity, if that is. So thank
That's
you
the other
so
thing I
much,
do.
Brett.
The other thing I do is I work on re-engineering humanity. Yeah.
Details like that, yeah. we might need that right now. It's looking ahead to the next pandemic, right? So okay.
We are certain lot of nudging
Yeah, right.
is happening.
It's great to see you, Brett. Thanks for joining.
Thanks.
And Gustavo?
Hi, good morning to everybody. So I'm Gustavo Torrens. I'm associate professor at the Department of Economics at IU. I'm also director of the political economy program at the Ostrom Workshop. My research centers on institutions, political economy, and economic and political development. I am super excited about this initiative. Well, I hope this triggers a lot of research synergies with, I don't know, very different perspective. So super excited to be here.
Absolutely. No, thanks so much, Gustavo. And I second that. And David?
Yes, hello everybody. My name is David Stadelmann. I'm a professor at the University of Bayreuth in Germany. Some of you may know me from some workshop participations also a few weeks ago. And I'm currently working together with Gustavo in the working group on the political economy of pandemics, and we'll talk about that soon. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, David. Really appreciate it. And then we have Lisa, and then as a heads up, Janet and Barb. So Lisa?
Unmute, there I am.
There you go.
Lisa Blomgren Amsler. I'm at the O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs here at IU Bloomington. Lawyer by training, social scientist by necessity, given my location, and currently working on the question of intrastate preemption and a grant from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation that we brought in to a local community grassroots organization, the Community Justice and Mediation Center. And it's on improving on how to enhance the voice of underserved communities in health policy decision-making. We wrote it before the pandemic, obvious, and it was supposed to be public engagement in person. So please pray for us.
Indeed. That's really fascinating. I wasn't aware of that. That's wonderful work. I'd love to hear more about it. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thanks.
And just so everybody knows, one of the goals from this obviously is there's some pre-existing working groups, but as we all introduce and as we chat and get to know each other, there's absolutely opportunities to form other groups that might be related. So the idea is just to start hopefully some collaborations, including maybe in that space, Lisa. That'd be wonderful. And then Janet, if you wanted to say a quick hello.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Scott. I'm Janet McCabe, and I think I don't know very many of you, which is great for me. Maybe not so much for you. I'm the director of IU's Environmental Resilience Institute, which is a creation of the Prepared for Environmental Change Grand Challenge of President McRobbie, one of the 3 grand challenges. I'm also a professor at the McKinney Law School. I use McKinney Law School in Indianapolis, and that's where I'm based. I'm also a lawyer by training, and I'm not an academic. I spent all my career in state and federal government, including working at the US EPA during the Obama administration, working on air pollution policy and climate change, all the stuff that you're reading about in the news that's getting rolled back. I gave 7 years of my life to, but I'm ever optimistic. So I welcome this opportunity to work more closely with the Ostrom Workshop. The Institute has not yet done something together with Ostrom, and it's high time, I think. And anytime I see the word resilience, my feelers go up. In particular, there are so many parallels and connections between the conditions that lead to pandemic and the conditions that are leading to climate change impacts, the causes, the things that have happened that are helping to create conditions conducive to pandemics and create conditions conducive to climate change impacts. We're all about how to make Indiana and beyond more prepared and resilient for climate change. And now I would add pandemics to that. So this is a great opportunity, and Looking forward to the discussion.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much, Janet. And I agree. High time to do more with you and with ERI. So I really appreciate you joining the mix here. And as many of you know, Lynn was very interested in the resilience of institutions. So we'll get more into that. So Barb, and then we have Brian and Beatrice. I don't want to put anybody on the spot either. So if you prefer not to say a quick hello, that's completely fine. But Barb, did you want to say hi?
Sure. Hi to all. I'm in the media school at IU. I'm also a member of the Workshop Advisory Council. And I'm also a lawyer by training and also a PhD social scientist. So I try and do at the intersection of the two.
That's right.
My interest, I'm not sure exactly which of the working groups under this whole bridge I would best fit in, but I'm particularly interested in the resilience of institutions, but particularly as it applies to communications technologies. That's where my expertise is. And I have a long history having worked in industry. I've worked at the FCC and now academia. And certainly the pandemic has it's elevated, just say, on the agenda, the importance of the broadband infrastructure and its accessibility and things like that.
Yep.
But we certainly have a lot of governance issues, and so this deals to resilience, polycentricity, the political economy. I'm not sure, depending upon how the working groups are going to focus themselves, which one might best fit with my interests. But I'm definitely very much curious. And I think I saw Johannes's name, Johannes Bauer. You're on the call. I was at MSU for a couple of years on faculty there, so I want to give a call out to Johannes, who I've known for many years, and I'm glad to see he's on this group.
Oh, that's great. Oh, thank you so much, Barb. We have a critical mass of lawyers. We're going to put all of us in a breakout room and let everybody else really get to the actual research.
Well, it's a necessary skill set, to join the club.
No, it's wonderful. I'm just kidding. Great to see you, Barb. And then just in the interest of time, we'll try to make these, as speedy as we can, at least. Brian, did you want to say a quick howdy? Oh, I think you might still be muted there, but I got you. See if that worked.
Sorry.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Brian Bruns. I do research and consulting on cooperation and water governance. I was a visiting scholar at the workshop about 10 years ago. Most recently, I've been working on a draft chapter about transforming climate dilemmas from tragedy to cooperation. So I guess my interest is kind of lessons and opportunities for other global challenges.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Brian. Great to see you as well. And Beatrice?
I'm a lawyer too. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I'm Beatrice. I'm a fellow at the Berkman Klein Center at Harvard University. And I work on data governance issues, mostly in cities. But then I also had like a quick pivot, maybe about a month and a half ago, towards contact tracing apps and so on. Absolutely. And yeah, I just saw the call for the meeting and it sounded very interesting. So.
Absolutely, Beatrice. No, it's great to see you. Yeah, and the whole smart cities perspective here. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
About the need for smart cities now as we try to grapple with this evolving pandemic. So no, thanks for joining. That's great. And Mark, and then just for what it's worth, we have Dean and Jesse. Oh, I think you might still be muted, Mark, but let me.
Mark Kanazawa, longtime friend of the workshop. I was a visiting scholar at the workshop last fall. I had a great time. I'm an economist by training. Sorry. And
You'll go back
I've done a lot of work in water governance over the years. So pandemics is actually quite new to me, but I'm very interested in the topic, and I'm tuning in today just because I wanted to find out more about what's happening with pandemic governance.
That's fantastic. It's so great to see you, Mark. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I want to catch up with all of you. We just have to do more virtual cocktail hours, I guess. It's great to see you. And then, yeah, Dean?
Yes, good morning. I'm Dean Luke. I direct the Natural Resources Governance Program here. I'm a professor of economics. Not really too familiar with pandemic economics, but have done work in renewable resources and so on. So I'm here mostly to check in and probably interested in the political economy working group more than the other ones. Thank you.
That sounds great. No, thank you so much, Dean. Good to see you. And then Jesse?
Morning, everyone. I'm calling in from the West Coast, so 7 a.m. here.
Oh, this is dedication. Oh, I'm so sorry.
True dedication. No, it's great to be here. I really appreciate this about the workshop community, that it's so welcoming. So I am one of the interlopers who's not in academia, but I work in a small foundation that is focused on lunar policy. So we look at sort of impending activities coming up on the moon, what's happening there, and how we can bring governance to those activities in a way that will support peaceful and cooperative lunar futures. So it's really nice to see a few familiar faces here, but I will also be working with Marco Jensen to support a sort of space theme as part of the IASC conference next year. So keep an eye out for that.
That's awesome. No, I love that, Jesse. And we'll, as we loop into the Governing the Commons 30 years later, commemorations and events for this coming year, I'd love to have, frankly, a space one as well to kind of highlight all the relevant work being done by OSHM affiliates on space governance, a subject near and dear to my heart, and frankly, a really interesting one right now.
Amazing.
In the news again, which is great. Wonderful to see you, Jesse. Thanks so much. And Sylvia? Oh, and sorry, we have Sylvia, and then for what it's worth, if you wanted to say a quick hello, we have Thomas after that, and then Catherine.
Okay, I'm not sure if I'm a lurker. I saw the link on Twitter just in time to catch this, and it looked interesting. I've drifted away from academia, but I am grounded in Ostrom and continue to follow the work. I've done some recent work on water affordability. I'm a sometimes adjunct who recently signed up for FEMA as a reservist, and I'm not deployed yet. Imagine that.
Imagine that, right?
But here I am.
There you go. Oh, no, that's great. You're most welcome. Thanks so much for joining. And everyone's kind of changing order on the top there, so I apologize. I'm not sure who I said would be next, but right now I have.
I think I was okay. I think I was next. Hannes here.
Yes, yes.
Hi everyone. It's nice to see some of you again. I remember having met some of you last year at the WOW conference. I'm actually calling in from Thailand tonight, but I am a PhD candidate at SOAS University of London, and as part of my PhD, I look into polycentricity in international organizations. More particularly polycentricity in the United Nations and the implementation of the 2030 agenda. So when it comes to the pandemic right now, I'm very interested in, or actually I already started working on two specific papers. One looks at the early lessons from emergency management perspective. And the second one looks at how to implement SDG 3 around public health, and I'm focusing on the role and repositioning of WHO as one of the UN agencies. So looking forward to hearing from others. Thanks.
Fantastic. No, thank you so much, Thomas. It's wonderful. Oh, I'm sorry. We're moving to Thomas next. Thank you so much. and then Thomas, if you'd like to also say a quick hello, feel free.
Hi, yeah, this is Tom Coons from Tacoma, Washington, West Coast. Old, when I say old, I mean that. Old student of Lynn's, and I'm working on collaborative governance and watersheds, and most recently polycentricity with the group that did the book last fall. So great to be chiming in back to my mothership in Indiana with you guys this morning.
Oh, it's brilliant. No, so good to see you. Thanks so much for joining as well. That's excellent. And then I know a lot of people might just also be chiming in without perhaps wanting to have a call out. So how about this? If you'd like to say a quick hello now, would you just kind of either use the raise hand feature or just feel free to interject? Anybody else want to say a greeting? Hearing none. We'll continue. Okay, we'll continue. That's fine. But if you would like to later, that's completely fine. I just saw the rest didn't have cameras on, etc. So I didn't want to put anybody else on the spot. Okay, no, that sounds great. Thanks so much for doing that. Next, we're going to pivot and talk a little bit about what we're up to. This initiative at the workshop is just that. It's an initiative, right? Which means it's a bringing together of a lot of our different disparate components, which includes these days working groups as well as programs, as you see here. And just trying to find synergies between those and to hopefully help move the ball forward here in some interesting new ways. Of course, building from the work that the workshop's been known for decades here So on that point, you guys see the agenda at the top there. We're going to start with Gustavo and David, and they're going to be telling us a little bit about the working group that they have in mind for the political economy of pandemics. Then after that, we'll talk a bit about human rights and privacy perspectives. Then we'll move on to institutions. Mike McGinnis had a conflict, but he wrote actually a little interjection on the polycentricity front. And actually, I kind of share his interest in that as well. So I'll post that when the time comes, and we can maybe have a quick discussion about that too. But first, Gustavo and David, would you like to maybe kick things off here?
Yes, so thank you very much, Scott. So let me just mention a couple of things. First of all, I would like to stress that we see this as a starting point. So you have to start somewhere. So we are not expecting that this is all that the Austrian workshop will be doing related to pandemics, but we need to start somewhere. So please do not think that this is just some kind of fixed structure. We envision that maybe this evolve over time. So it's possible that different groups evolve into new groups, they divide, they merge. So we are open to all these options. No? Specifically about the political economy group, so the idea is to focus more on the political economy issues. So it's a pandemic generates political economy problems in many dimensions. At the micro level, when you start implementing solutions, there are political economy problems in the political system when you try to implement the potential solutions. A pandemic also generates an economic and sometimes even a political crisis. So there are many interesting questions there. There is also a broad question about should we build institutions for future situations that are similar to this one, okay? So that's a very interesting, if you want, institutional building or institutional design question. So we are also interested in addressing this type of problems. So again, the perspective of the group is it's broad in the sense that we are envisioning people from very different disciplines to be able to make a contribution here. Again, the same commitment as always in the Austrian workshop, rigorous analysis, focus on governance and institutions. That's kind of a defining characteristic. We will need to find the specific on this issue, but again, that mark will be there for sure. And then, again, I would just pass to David because I think, David, you can talk a little bit more about some specific things. So David has been doing very interesting work on the proposing solutions like immunity certificates, but also studying the political economy of the pandemics. And he's also running a survey all over the world. And I think he had some preliminary results to show us today. So I don't know, David, if you want to do that.
I can take over.
But I passed on you so you can just allow people to sample what kind of things you have in mind. And just as a reminder, the idea is that David will be the person leading this working group, and I think it's a great choice. He's an excellent researcher, and he has also been doing very active research on this issue since the beginning of the crisis. So, David, please.
Yeah. I will try to take over. Thank you very much, Gustavo, and also thank you, Scott, of course, for inviting me and having me. So, I mean, our general thinking is, as always, we want to put humans with all their diversity regarding preferences and their behavior in the center of the analysis. And we argued very early on that pandemics are not only biological events, but they generate impacts that we should understand from a very broad societal, political, and also an economic perspective. And then it immediately becomes clearer that pandemics increase the problem of scarcity that we always have. And the next step is then that not solving the problem of scarcity, but analyzing scarcity and analyzing large problems in general with a heart requires them to be analyzed rationally. That's what we try to do in this working group. And we have already put on the website a few of the things that we want to do. So for example, one is to analyze a bit better the role of experts during the crisis. And I have been running very early, actually it's already closed now, a survey among scientists. We have a sample of, I will share my screen quickly. We have a sample, I hope you can see my screen. We have now a sample of almost 13,000 scientists who have participated in our survey. The survey started 4 weeks ago and has closed now. So we were really running at the height of the crisis, actually. On average, there are more than 10,000 responses per question or per item. And as it closed just yesterday, I can't say a lot, but of course I wanted to have a very quick look at some of the results if you are talking about experts here. And I have to say, who is a scientist? So we have a relatively broad definition of who is a scientist, but then again, it's not too broad. So we say we sampled a number of peer-reviewed papers, and we say if a person has published in a peer-reviewed paper, and if this person, he or she, is a corresponding author, then we call this person a scientist. And we've sampled along a number of different disciplines. We asked them on opinions regarding crisis. So the first question was simply the political reactions to coronavirus in most Western countries were based on sound scientific advice. It was a Likert scale from 1 to 7 actually, so median is 4. So scientific advice was partly adhered to. And I was working very early on and presented that also on immunity certificates. We ask scientists regarding their evaluation of immunity certificates. So these are these immunity passports, how they are sometimes called. So we were advocating them relatively early on from a pure economic perspective. But of course, we are interested in knowing what other people think about it and what different scientists think about it. Because from an economic point of view, we would have a very clear opinion. But we need, of course, other evaluations too. And here you see a few of them. It's just most people evaluate it as good for public health, good for the economy, not necessarily fair to others. So that's the modus is 4, so it's in the middle, partly as increasing inequality. So of course, as always, there are trade-offs. This is something what we would have expected. So we will certainly try to continue working on this immunity certificates issue. So there are many questions, including ethical questions, that are unresolved, and we are not necessarily specialists there, but in my other team, there are ethicists, or at least philosophers. But there are also other fundamental economic questions which often relate to trade-offs again. So this is also what we would like to analyze. And I've just written out a few things with Gustavo. If you look at very poor countries, then for example, excess death rates, which are estimated to be due to lockdowns, and only in 3 domains, and that's now for Africa, are most likely at least in the same range as expected deaths due to COVID-19. And that's only secondary health effects and only for 3 prevalent diseases there. So the first estimates go up to 850,000 deaths due to AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis due to the lockdown. So many other things are not counted yet. We, of course, then want to go on to economic effects, where it's well known that, adverse economic circumstances also negatively affect health outcomes. So it's not either you have a good economy and good health, but it's rather, oh, you have a functioning economy and good health, or at least it's not necessarily a trade-off. You can have both there. And we are particularly interested in what we call here societal effect, and this then links back to what we really want to do in the end. We want to look at institutions, and we want to analyze the political economy of rational behavior versus behavior during the pandemics. Partly perhaps this was rational, but partly perhaps not. We want to know what type of institutions should be built also for the future in order to deal with pandemics or similar situations of crisis. We want to highlight the relevance of separation of powers and checks and balances. I think it's quite natural that during a crisis, some power is handed over to the executive. But of course, at a certain point in time, you want to have your checks and balances back. So we are taking a long-term perspective there. And these are just some of the topics that we intend to explore, and where we already have now some results regarding the survey. I think we are the only ones now who have been running really at the height of the crisis with, so I know surveys are always critical, and people tend to give responses the way how they give responses, but if you think that scientists are comparatively rational persons, which I think they are, at least more rational than numerous politicians, and I'm not referring here necessarily to American politicians, but also some European politicians, and of course more rational than, well, a random person often on the street. And of course, scientists are also used to answering relatively abstract questions. So from that point of view, I'm quite confident that we have, well, that we can generate quite interesting results there.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, David. I really appreciate that overview. It's fascinating. And I went ahead and I copied some of the potential research questions that the group is interested in the chat window there, so people can take a look at that if they haven't already as well. But before we move on, any questions, any comments, anything along those lines for David or Gustavo? And while folks are thinking, I was a bit remiss. I wanted to say that the way these working groups work, it really varies as it has over the history of the workshop, right? So these are, basically little miniature self-organized communities. Some have a specific end goal, a publication or a grant in mind, and some meet more regularly than others as a result, right? If there's, for example, a deadline coming up. But the expectations of the workshop are frankly that we're just helping to, facilitate, to matchmake, to bring people together with a common interest in governance and the resilience of institutions, in this case, in times of pandemic. So from our perspective, there's a lot of flexibility in how this proceeds. And to kind of highlight that and to help with next steps before we think of any other questions and then move on, I went ahead, you guys will see in the chat box there, and did a very, very quick little sign-up sheet. So as we go through, if you're interested in getting on the various listservs that we're going to be setting up for these different working groups, if you wouldn't mind, just put down your name. Basically, all we need is your name, email address. If you'd like to say a little bit about your institution or position, that's fine. It's not required. And then most importantly, which of the working groups, or if you have ideas for other working groups that are related to this, and maybe your research, feel free to put that in this sheet too. But it gives us some record to help with next steps there. So as I gave you some time to maybe think of any other questions or comments, any come to mind, guys, before we move on there? It's at a fascinating early stage, right? And there's so many related issues that I think it's going to be really fascinating to delve into in a lot of detail, frankly, from the ethics to you name it, right? Of all this stuff. So I think it's I'm really glad you guys are taking this on. It's going to be interesting to maybe even do some cross-country or cross-regional comparisons, right? For the views of how this is playing out. you know,
I think as I was reading Lynn Ostrom's work, this is really something where she would say, oh, that's something interesting where you have to get into, because it connects so many different topics. It's truly interdisciplinary. So at least that's the way I read her work.
No, and that's right. And that's right. And the idea is to find that, you know, some type of common language here, right? Exactly. And in this case, maybe it's the IAD or SES frameworks, or maybe it's some, you know, new iteration of that, like Brett, what you did with governing the knowledge commons stuff, right? So I think it's a neat opportunity to apply some of these insights, but also to expand them into some new areas, and frankly, help respond to this really critical crisis, right, that the world is facing. So I'm excited that you guys are doing this work. I think it's absolutely fascinating. One last chance. Any other questions or comments from anybody before we move on?
I was not sure how to hold up my hand. This is Hannes
so sorry.
again.
Yeah.
I was wondering, David, could you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by institutions and institutions that should be built for pandemics in the future? I'm interested in what you've actually already done, what you're looking into, and where you see this debate going. If you remember, I was saying I started looking into the UN as an institution and where it should be going. So I'm really interested in this part of your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, I tried. So we are starting to look into that, but there are at least two ideas. So one is that in order to deal with pandemics, it's always difficult already to declare when is it a pandemic or not, and different countries may react differently. And usually it's the executive declaring the pandemic, and then the executive getting all the power during that time. So one institutional feature which one may think about is to have a separate commission, an independent commission declaring the pandemic, and then the government, the executive, takes over. Okay, and then the commission, which is independent, every 2 or 3 weeks evaluates the position, because there is a clear incentive, at least as I see it, that the executive branch tends to profit, at least at the beginning, from the crisis. So they have an incentive potentially not to prolong the crisis, but at least to keep the state of emergency going for some time. So that's one idea, to separate the declaration power of what is a pandemic from then actually executing what is necessary during a pandemic. Of course, we have such institutions in some countries already. So I think you are Swiss, as I hear it. I mean, Swiss local commission, Switzerland's local commissions regarding financial matters and the auditors, they are similar to that, but of course it's a very different institution. Bureaucracy in general could be seen as such an institution if bureaucracy is not too dependent on the executive. So these are the lines that we are currently thinking how something like that could be either implemented or how something like that could look like. But there will be many problems, of course, and this is why research is required. Thank God we have some time to do that.
No, that's right. And I saw that Lisa raised her hand as well. So maybe Lisa, if you'd like to go before we.
Well, just briefly, what I'm worrying about right now is public voice. And of course, the public voice that we've seen during the last week is also having an impact on things. And I was just wondering to what extent this research program is going to address that.
I think that's extremely important, what you are saying. So I have usually in all my papers, I argue that one has to take not only all individuals seriously and listen to them, but also act on them. So I have done a lot of research on political representation and how to improve political representation. Now, I would say there is, at least at the beginning of a crisis, always a small problem, because information is not yet available to everybody. Interest groups have not perfectly organized yet there is a lot of uncertainty. What we usually expect during emergencies is that rational decision makers take over, and then they may also implement some policies which are unpopular. But because most people at the state of emergency, they don't want to make tough decisions. And during an emergency, it's not a popularity contest between politicians usually. But once the state of emergency is over, then we are going back to normal. But actually what we would, for the moment, I may change my opinion, but what I would like to have, and I think what most constitutions to some extent provide already, at least constitutions of functioning democracies, is that if you have a state of emergency, power goes to, in Austria or Switzerland, would be the president. And then this remains there for some time, under the assumption, of course, that the president acts rationally and that he is not in a strict popularity competition, at least for the time. But this has to be evaluated. So I think for 2 months during the emergency, you don't need to listen to every single voice in the populace, because when we have direct democracy, for example, in Switzerland, it's not the case that we make quick decisions from today I propose something and tomorrow we decide. But usually democracy works best if there is some deliberation and then a long process of discussion. And when I say long, I mean 3 months. And of course, the virus is quicker than 3 months. But I want this deliberation and this discussion back at some point, of course. Whether it's 3, 4, 5 months, doesn't matter. But I want, personally now, I would want to see a relatively clear structure of how one can move away from the initial emergency situation where somebody has to take over the lead, and then how this power goes back to the people, and that all voices are accounted for.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much, David. And to your point, Lisa, as well, it's not the case where we have to fit, everything to do, even with political economy under a single working group, because these are interconnected and really important issues, each of which kind of deserves its own attention. So to help with that, I included a link in the chat box there to basically that has our current list of working groups, as well as the process for forming new ones, because that's open to all members of the community. So if there's a group who would really like to get together and explore issues like public voice as it pertains to governance, I mean, there's a huge number of issues right there that deserve attention. Consider forming one, right? And we're happy to help with that. We can help form the listservs. We can help get the word out. As you know, with our wonderful staff, there's a lot of resources we can bring to the table. So just wanted to put that out there. This is wonderful, but just in the interest of time, I don't want to give short shrift to others as well. So thank you, David. Gustavo, I think it's fair to say, these are your 2-point people for this particular effort, as you guys see in the chat box there and in the sign-up sheet. That those will be kind of a great way to get the ball rolling in terms of other group members. So be sure to sign up for their group if you're interested in this type of work. And then Angie, would you like to say a little bit about what you're up to in terms of data governance and human rights and privacy issues in times of pandemic?
Sure. So I had already mentioned some of this, so I don't want to beat it up too much. I view working groups as working on whatever you want, to be fair. So I personally am less about research and more about being sure the people who are deploying and creating policy are looking at existing research and understanding the tech that they're letting loose on all of us. And so we are currently working in 3 key areas: health, smart cities or smart region. I mean, it's controversial. So smart cities, smart regions, fill in the blank, and the justice as an institution, of course. And we've stood up 3 different initiatives that a couple of them I can't share this publicly, but you're welcome to write me. So the health initiative is a very specific pilot that has to do with individuals' ability to control their health related information and to have medical institutions who are part of a collaborative receive that information in an incredibly timely manner so they can connect them both to other medical needs and also social services. So that is incredibly important right now in our opinion. So again, I can't give you, we're way too public for me to, you know, disclose some of that. But we're well into a pilot on that. And yeah, so I'm on that committee to obviously talk about how it is that, you know, individuals do not want their data just massively shared. They don't want it saved in a centralized database. And how do we construct technology so that it is not leaking or oversharing information? There's a group of affiliates who, to the best of my knowledge, aren't on the call. And also I can't share with you the full details of this because this is under review, but they've already done a study that says that individuals are not willing to share more, even in the face of a pandemic. So we haven't seen a massive shift in individuals' understanding of a balance between what they view as private information and others. And so, you know, that's a massive problem with all these tech deployments because no one's going to use them. No one trusts them. No one's going to use them. So, you know, so we're trying to design around that because in my opinion, a lot of this is about trust in the designer, trust in the deployer, trust in the information, all that type of stuff. So we're setting up a collaborative, and a data trust is what is probably going to happen in our pilot. Cities, of course, cities is about, we're working on three things. Smart, which has become a wrong buzzword for everything, quite honestly, because none of it's smart. But anyway, smart technology that could actually include improvements of infrastructure, even in times of crisis, and the resiliency as well. And then the other project, which isn't perfectly matched with this, but no one's tying it yet well enough, is the new open data initiative as it relates to government data, which in some cities basically means there are massive data dumps occurring with no structure to the data, but someone who understands how to clean up data and create some structure can create incredibly granular levels of personal information that is being used to create things like information about ambulance runs that are specifically able through several databases to tie very clearly to who the ambulance came and got and why, which is going to be a massive issue if it gets out that, you know, you have the virus and therefore your family. I mean, this is the new Scarlet Letter, right? So, you know, so we're also working on that. We're working with some specific cities, and including Bloomington, you know, that I don't think that's a massive surprise. And IU, right? Brett's on here, so I don't think he gets a chance to talk, but he's swinging things out on the chat. So Brett's obviously also doing some work on consent and other things like that. So, you know, this group, I think, is developing into the group of, hey, look, we have research. Use the research in real life right now. Stop pretending like you don't know that people interact with technology in a different way, that they don't trust Google. And, you know, they're not amused that Google releases these flu pandemic maps that are, or maybe not pandemics, but flu maps that are wrong, literally wrong based on search results. And then the last one, which is taking a lot of my time right now, I'll be honest with you, is the justice deployments. And obviously the entire world, quite honestly, justice systems went digital very fast. There are massive issues with that. We've had some really good results in places where there are people who are already doing what most of us call online dispute resolution. So you've seen Indiana will have rolled out some amazing things that include the removal of notaries and all kinds of the really historic necessity of standing in a courthouse and in front of someone and signing something. You know, those type of things, we've been able to roll out, you know, policy rollbacks very fast to allow signatures to occur on and e-filing to occur for non-lawyers and all kinds of stuff. More and more of that will come out. So that's very much about creating policy, again, based on the knowledge of the research that exists and the actual way the technology works. To be sure people understand actual tech, you'd be surprised how many times I'm on courts with judges who are doing nothing but using Zoom and say, well, you know, what about AI? And I'm like, okay, there is AI in here, but it's not, it's AI to keep your connection stable. What the heck? Okay, so I spend tons of time just explaining how basic tech works to people so we don't have really cruddy policy. And then that particular area, we were fortunate enough that we already had some infrastructure in place that when it launched, even though it was a massive shift overnight, we were ready to do some research. So that network is somewhat connected. And so we were already able to see if we have, you know, and we've had massive reports of more people attending their hearings, for example, than ever. So there haven't been as many bench warrants and things like that issued for people's failure to appear. So, you know, we're always conscious of the research need, but right now it's such a boots on the ground, which I probably shouldn't use that word, or that phrase, but it's such a massive, just get in there and be sure this is being done right, because if you don't do it right from the beginning, people won't trust the system and you'll never reconvince them to come back to the government surveillance efforts if that's how it comes across at first. So that's what I do in terms of the working group. And we need to be thinking about this. We have massive issues as it relates to hard of hearing individuals trying to use Zoom and come into meetings. Obviously, the mobility issues have been allowed individuals to be more participatory in hearings. I mean, it's an interesting conversation that's ongoing right now in these areas. So, you know, I'm not excluding research. It's just, you know, quite frankly, the justice environment is completely shut down. So I don't have 3 months to do this. We're positive at the end of June, our courts will be overrun when the renters' prohibition for evictions is over in the state of Indiana. We are absolutely positive Marion County will go under from the stress. So, you know, I got 30 days to figure that out. I think we'll pull it off, but we'll see. So that's what we're doing. All hands on. Anyone that wants to join in. I hate the idea of there are 3 or 4 of us coming up with this stuff, because if we're forgetting things, it's going to be in place. And it's hard to change because people didn't want to go to tech in the first place. So once you convince them to use it, if they actually really do hate it, you'll never convince them to go back. We've had multiple judges say, we hate one particular of the platforms. And so we've tried to shift them to the other one, but they are now so resistive because it's all tech, you know, as opposed to WebEx and Zoom and Microsoft Teams are functionally different from top to bottom. Yeah. So I'm happy to have more and more. And in all fairness, I've got to give a shout out to Scott, who's massively chatting right now and I can't keep up. But so a lot of this is running through Scott's clinic. And so it's a combination of the Ostrom workshop and Scott's cyber clinic and the Maurer School of Law. So we've got this really fun collaboration that was able to be stood up really fast, and it worked very, very well. So I'm interested in, send me an email. I do have an 11, I will say, and apologies for that, but I do have, I think I have an 11. It might be 11:15, so I might be able to stay on, but you are welcome to email me if you have a different idea that should go in here. I get ideas from undergrads that I run with, quite frankly. So do not be shy. Any idea is a good idea until we do a little bit of trial and error and we decide that didn't work. But that's the idea of what we do, right? Well, that was a disaster. I can share with you the disasters of launches that we've done in the last 30 days.
That would be its own.
There's a couple really fun ones. Massive cybersecurity issue as it relates to IU and Zoom. Just saying.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Just that.
Your plate is overflowing, Angie. It's fair to say, but we really appreciate you taking the time to go through some of that, right? And to that point, there's this working group dedicated, obviously, to human rights and privacy issues. But as you said, there's lots of existing working groups, including the Smart and Connected Cities initiatives and et cetera, that are also going to be, I think it's fair to say, dealing with pandemic-related topics, right? So as you look to the sign-up sheet that was sent around, absolutely, if you're interested in one of these topics, wonderful. But keep in mind, in that other link of our existing working groups, we have a lot of them that you might be interested, including, I'm seeing a lot of interest in polycentricity, right? And Bill Blomquist and Mike McGinnis lead that effort for us and for the workshop. As you guys just saw, as we kind of wrap up here, just in the interest of time, this was a response that Mike had sent to me with his apologies because he had a conflict this morning. But this kind of gets us into our last theme of the resilience of institutions and polycentricity. And the interest there is frankly at both, of course, the community level, but also frankly the national and even the international level. Mike's response here is kind of focused on his interest in kind of national level polycentric responses in the US healthcare system. That's an area that I've done a little bit with as well, more from the security side of the ledger, as you'd imagine, but that is absolutely fair game. That's going to be part of the polycentricity working group going forward. So you can read his response and feel free to reach out, to me or to Bill or to Mike directly with thoughts along those lines. At the international level, as we did introductions, it sounds like there's several of us who are very keen to figure out ways, especially that multilateral institutions can manage this crisis more effectively, right? Whether that's around equitable distribution of vaccines. That's very much a hot topic. Even today, I think the UK is hosting a conference, a new donor conference to help raise funds and awareness of the need to make sure that when a effective COVID-19 vaccine is discovered, that is equitably distributed. My first love, frankly, and back in my PhD was all about sustainable development and international law. So I'm kind of keen on that aspect of this for what it's worth. So I think that's going to be part of this resilience of institutions group. And also just applying lessons, as Mike says there in his chat, from polycentricity, from even the Ostrom design principles, and from these leading governance frameworks. So, in other words, it's pretty encompassing. I think we can take that in a lot of directions. There could be a whole, frankly, sub-theme just on the reform of the WHO that might need to happen in the wake of this, right? Or the CDC for that matter, right? So there's a lot of different aspects to this. But Two things I do want to do, given that time is so short, and I know we all have other things to run off to. One is I want to give a chance to Janet to offer any other ideas or insights she might like to. And Kate was able to join us as well, and she said that it'll only take a few minutes to name off a couple of different COVID-19 related grant opportunities that she's come across. So that's how we're going to finish things off here for now. But this is just the start of the conversation, of course. So Janet, first, over to you in case you had any other reflections or thoughts to add to the resilience piece.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. This has been fascinating to listen to. What I'd like to add, I think, is that the Institute has focused, we have a wide range of resilience and climate change research going on all across the university in many, many fields that are not particularly relevant to this. But we also have, at the Institute, we have focused a lot on working with local governments in Indiana specifically, but kind of carving out a niche to work with small to medium-sized Midwestern governments, local governments who may not have access to the climate change resilience resources that are developed more with either massive cities in mind or coastal areas in mind, or also may be sources of information that are not as comfortable for the many Midwestern communities to reach out to. Whereas places like IU are pretty trusted sources of information and assistance. I'm very interested in real world impacts and what we can do to get resources into the hands of people who need to make decisions every day. And so my interest in participating in a group and having the ERI be involved would both be from, and I note that there aren't a lot of our ERI faculty on the phone today. Eduardo Brandizio was going to join, but I think was not able to. So there may be, from the academic side, connections and collaborations that appear here. But I'd be interested in the sort of practical, real world, how we turn these things into useful tools for governments.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think there's some nice alignment there with what Angie described, and even some of the stuff we're doing with local governments through the clinic. So we'll follow up on that. That's fantastic. Okay, and then lastly, Kate, I did put a link to everybody to the ERI site, just as a little shout out, Janet, in the chat box there, people wanting to learn more. And then Kate, if you're still on the line, and if you're able, we'd love to hear if you had any kind of quick, high-level thoughts about relevant grant opportunities that you've come across related to governance in times of pandemic.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. My life is not camera ready this morning, so.
All right.
My screen is my name. Thanks so much for all of your good work. It's just wonderful to hear about all your research efforts. I am part of the workshop. I provide research development support for faculty and faculty affiliates. There's 2 links that I'd like to share, and I'll put those in chat. The first is for IU's page of COVID-19 related research funding opportunities. And the powers that be have been quite good at updating the site, and it spans foundations, nonprofits, corporations, federal agencies. I also encourage you to use Foundation Directory Online for some more specific searches, which is accessible through OneIU, as well as Pivot, which is also accessible through OneIU. Everything is moving so quickly, right? It's affecting everything, and in terms of funding, the landscape that we see, there are COVID-19 specific funding opportunities. Then there are the existing funding opportunities that now have like a line in bold that, or you're required to attach an addendum of how they are responsive to the current pandemic situation. And then thirdly, there's also just existing, the existing funding opportunities that have been out there. The second link that I'd like to share is IU Bloomington had a call with Dr. Arthur Lupia, who's the director of the SPE Directorate at NSF. And his talk is very encouraging, very supportive, and I really enjoyed it, and I encourage you all to watch it. I think the last thing I'll say is to just, as you already know, talk to your colleagues in other disciplines at other institutions. Stay connected within healthy guidelines, right? We're all a little bit too connected. But things are just happening so quickly, and funding opportunities are just rolling out one after the other. But, at any rate, I am here for support, and if you have any questions about any possible funding opportunity that you want to pursue.
That sounds great. No, thank you so much, Kate. I really, really appreciate that. And of course, that's open to everybody in terms of being able to use the workshop and use Kate to go after relevant grant opportunities where you think we can add value, right? Even if you're an external affiliate, we can find partnerships and et cetera that will probably work. In terms of the Google sign-up sheet as well there, guys, I went ahead and included several links to the funding page that Kate just sent out, as well as the initiative, to our working groups page, even to some other related stuff like ERI. So I know that we're running a few minutes over and people have to scoot, and that's no problem. But I wanted to give one last opportunity for anybody to ask any questions or anything that might be on your minds as you kind of reflect on these various opportunities, or any suggestions about other ways that the workshop you think could add some value in different ongoing collaborations as we struggle through these interesting times here. And that could be an ongoing conversation as well. Okay, so feel free to reach out at any point to me directly, to anybody that you see on the screen here in terms of workshop leadership. And we're happy to help. We're always open to new ideas. As Angie said, we want to be responsive. It's a fantastic worldwide community that Lynn and Vincent left us, right? And I think we have a lot of really deep multidisciplinary connections that are lacking in a lot of different areas, and we can leverage those, I really think, effectively here, and hopefully make some contribution for the good, right? Which I know is what we're all after. So thank you all again for taking the opportunity to join us for this roundtable discussion. It'll just be the first. This is the kickoff. We'll follow up with more specific invitations as these various efforts get underway. And don't hesitate to reach out, as I said, with any other ideas. Stay safe, be well, try to enjoy the day as much as you can. And thanks again for making time this morning to be with us. And for all you do. Thanks, everybody. It's great seeing you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye.